Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. And I'm Marine Tanguy, and I'm incredibly excited to have you today to talk about what the best marketing strategy for brands today are. And one of them that we are going to be explaining is how do you do that working with artists, and why is it the marketing strategy that we strongly believe in. First of all, I want to apologize for my surroundings. I happen to be someone that's obsessively surrounded by art whenever I ever speak to people. But you're seeing me in an airport lounge because we just launched a new space, and this is the reason I'm here. I promise I have my mask right here, and I have been very reasonable, but I'm very sorry that for the first time, you cannot see any artworks or anything that's actually inspiring as I will be speaking, and you will just have barely to look at me in my presentation. So thank you so much for Maison&Objet to put this incredible suggestion forward. I think it's a very relevant discussions because many brands have been thinking, how do we communicate in these times? How do we activate content in digital space? How do we remain authentic? And we have found that artists have been incredibly helpful at that. So now I just want to see the presentation because I have lost it sadly. I cannot see. That's it. I hope everyone can see the screen. Okay, so I'm just going to give a little background on who I am and why you are talking to a random lady in an airport lounge about this conversation. So I'm Marine Tanguy, and I founded the first talent agency in the arts. I've been in the art world for 11 years now. So I first started my career when I was 21 years old. At the time, I was very lucky to be working for Steve Lazaridis, who spotted Banksy and JR. And then 2 years on from this, I was asked by an investor to open my own art gallery in Los Angeles. And out of this experience, I basically got exposed to the top talent agencies, the one that represents artists or sportives or musicians and actors, and basically help building them up. And we all know how Hollywood and Los Angeles are incredibly powerful at doing that. And I thought that was really interesting because everyone in my sector was obsessed with artworks on walls, and that's all they could do with visual artists. And I felt, but you know, it's like a sportive, like they play sports, but they obviously also front campaigns and inspire people on the ground, and everyone looked up to them as an inspiration, whether you played the sport or not. And I felt that my artists were that kind of inspiring people. They were that inspiring. They had social values that were incredible. And I felt I want a talent agency that's going to get their message out there, that's going to get them bigger than just the artworks that they produce. And ultimately, the artists can, you know, inspire many people. And that was kind of the what we wanted to build. I was saying to the girls when I started the conversation that you are talking to someone that is potentially one of the last positive person remaining, because we actually had a really good confinement, and we have been very fortunate in the fact that I didn't have to fire anyone. In fact, I had to hire people in this time, which I know how fortunate it is. And the reason I'm specifically in this airport of Nice is because we just launched a new space in an office in Monaco with our partners UBP. So for us, you know, it's been really special. And I'm very happy to kind of answer questions to how we've also managed this and why, because I obviously understand that this is something that would not be equal for everyone. Let's get back to our subject. So if we go on to the next slide, I started with doing a little research. So the next slide, that's it. So I started basically kind of doing a little research on the first brand collaborations. And the one that you see, I don't know if you remember the artist Dali, he had a huge mustache like this, and he was the first one to collaborate with brands. So at the time, he collaborated with a few fashion brands, and he was one of the first artists to kind of pioneer this. You also had Cocteau, which was also the kind of Paris in the early 20s. So that's kind of beginning of the 20th century. It was much more ad hoc. It was also a time where, you know, your artists and your designers and your fashion designers and your writers were kind of hanging in the cafes, and collaborations was very much happening that way. So it has, you know, it took it a little time to kind of be structured and kind of, you know, make its way forward after that. But luckily, we're now in a time where, you know, collaboration have boomed. And if you go on the next slide, I'm sure we can all kind of remember Jeff Koons partnering up with H&M, and Uniqlo has been behind the Tate Museum in London. So this is now something that is much more common to kind of see big fashion brands or big brands in general kind of putting their names with artists. And I think, you know, this is very much kind of the question here is why do they do this? So I've put a few markers to why that is, and from the research we had done when we started the business, where we believed this was the right thing to do. So first of all, my generation, and I'm a deep millennial, which is why I'm even talking from an iPhone in this terrible Wi-Fi of an airport lounge. You know, we are very much driven to want to look at art. So, you know, the number that I gave was that 77% of millennials engage in artistic creation or activations or artists online. So the desire to kind of want to be a part of the art sector has increased. And I think social media is definitely a very big part of that. I'm sure we all know which exhibitions we should be seeing in museums, just simply seeing like the Instagram of the influencers also going to the same show. So this has changed. I think our relationship to artists and art has completely evolved. And then, sorry, because actually I can't look at the screen. I'm going to try and enlarge it. That's perfect, sorry. The other thing obviously is, and I think that's something that I will touch on in terms of influencer marketing, and especially something in the current context, which is reputation. You know, if I look at how we select our artists, we have a selection committee, and we look over 200 people a month to pick very few. And we look for people who have been passionate about something, about a cause, or about a subject matter for years. So you are coming in, kind of buying into an expertise of someone and also the authenticity of someone. And that's something that I'm sure we've all seen with influencer marketing has kind of been challenging for some people, because if I advertise for a diet pill and straight away for something that contradicts it, it's a lot harder to trust me. But what's nice about artists is that the visual vision and also the message is very kind of core. And that's something that, you know, in a time where brands reputation-wise and communication-wise needs to be authentic, needs to communicate with the wider audience, needs to make sure that it's relatable, then the artist can take care of that. And I think it's also saying it in the angle that, as we all know, people, you know, believe in people, and I think having an artist kind of telling a story and telling why they care is sometimes a lot more powerful than having a corporate message. And that's just the way I think communication has evolved for brands, you know. And obviously, I think it's, you know, it's the visibility of the brand. So kind of coming back to what I just said on the fact that, you know, millennials are wanting to be part of that scene, you also acquire a new types of demographics. So let's say, and I will kind of give you the examples of people that we've worked with later, but, you know, if you are a fashion brand and suddenly you are partnering up with the art space, or an artist that's very known in the art space, then you're also acquiring a new demographics of people that's going to look at your brand in a way that they would never have kind of looked at it before. So it's also an acquisition and of databases of audiences. That's really interesting, because you're getting a very kind of targeting audience that has been following and trusting the artist for a long time. And I think that's very valuable. So if we can go on the next page, sorry, I forgot that I couldn't just switch it. So. Yes, so I feel this kind of reinforces a lot of what I've just been discussing, you know, on how, and that was a really interesting research that kind of read, and you kind of see all the credits will be on that. So by all means, the organizers can share that presentation with you, but on the fact that, you know, it was the respondents when being asked, you know, on how much value did this add to a brand after a collaboration, a lot of the time they were saying that they were perceiving the brand a lot more positively, and there was a lot of kind of really strong correlations that just happened after the collaboration. Then after that, you know, and I would kind of go on to different ways you can partner up as a brand, because, you know, you can have a partnership that is more to sell, or that's more limited edition. You can have a category of partnerships that is more specifically to kind of raise awareness or visibility, or to kind of see you through a different light that may not be as expected, and kind of enabling your brand to kind of take a little bit more freedom with what they want to say as well. Let's move forward. Thank you so much. I'm very sorry that they have to do it. It's all down to me and my responsibility for not being very good at these things. So this is something that I think will not play on the PDF. So you know what, move on to the next slide and I will discuss Chloe a bit later on the line. Okay, so this is kind of, let's just kind of take back, like, again, I kind of gave you the wider context, which is you now aware that a lot of brands are partnering up with artists. I think what's important, like with everything, is to not kind of jump on the trend wagon and make sure that you are taking hopefully like a good decision. What we have identified for us as like 4 key reasons to why, you know, the brand will want to kind of partner up is advertising, product design, and then also the activations of the interiors, and also the content itself. So let me kind of run you through a few things. So actually on my way from Heathrow on Tuesday, I was the most excited person, not only to fly, and I'm sure all of you are dying to fly too, but it was more that the picture you see on the left is on the advertising. I just basically captured it on Tuesday morning as I was about to board my plane. This was the collaboration of Lavazza, and they commissioned our artist Seipe to kind of do this huge campaign on taking care of the future is an art. And the little girl that you see is actually biodegradable paint on grass. And that was not only commissioned as like this huge public art project, but also it was an advertising per se. And this was across all the main airports in Europe for the past 2 years. So I was so happy because I wasn't sure it was still up. But it was very meaningful to see it. So I think here you can see, and again, I will kind of go on in more details later, and feel free by all means to ask me further questions, but you can see here that the brand is trying a few things. It's trying to have content. It's trying also to have that expertise that I mentioned. So Seipe just was on the Forbes 30 under 30 for being one of the, you know, most pioneering and known sustainable artists. And therefore, the biodegradable paint that he uses when making public artwork, or the way he goes about sourcing the material, is very ethical. And Lavazza has been trying to kind of be more and more ethical. And this is a perfect alignment for them, because it's showing that not only they are moving that way, but they also can represent that visually, which I think is really special. And so that's one key example. So I think at that point, you will have the actual public art, which is the actual event, and then it will become content. So the artists, they speak at their main conference, and then you will have all this advertising that you see, which is the use of the visual itself, and the visual will represent the vision that the brands wants to put forward. And again, I think everything that I'm advising comes out of a place that the brand and the artist needs to feel aligned on the message. And I think that's what we have seen has worked tremendously. It's really our expertise in kind of pairing and matching, making sure that, like, you know, there's no conflict in values or messaging, because I think that's really what's very powerful when the two are aligned. Product design is something that Vanessa Bruno did in South Korea with artist Jennifer Abistra, which I will kind of go on detailing as well. This is, I'm sure you can understand, is very much, you know, selling a product, but making a product, which is here t-shirts, much more appealing, because they have produced many amazing t-shirts, but the activations of the artist will kind of make it that little bit more unique. So it will convert not only a new audience, which are the collectors of our artists, because, you know, let's say the works of Jennifer Abistra will be between £3,000 and £7,000. Suddenly you can buy this t-shirt for £50, you know. So she will have a lot of people who follow her on social media that may not be able to afford her art, but actually want to wear it and want to still support her. And realistically here, this is something that again goes back into a database. Is again a high conversion rate, but it's also doing something that's a bit more different and outside of the brand and what they normally do. Interiors, which is also what I call activation, and that is normally retail activation. That's kind of the same. So we, and I know that's potentially the thing that through COVID, that's going to kind of not be as active, although I have a feeling on the couple of things that we have done that the stores could just use it as a way to kind of draw people in, as they close in and out, or as they resume or not. But basically, activation is, my eyes are always looking at this wall as an hotel customer, or as going into my favorite shop. So I almost forget to kind of look at it because I've seen it many times. And the amazing thing with art is that it just activates. So it just suddenly makes you notice something more strongly. And that's what you call an activation or retail activation. Content here is really interesting because this is a picture of a gigantic public art project that we developed in the desert 1 week prior to the confinement. So I can't even tell you how lucky we were that we could implement it. But therefore, you know, our artists have produced this enormous sculptures, but here that was for Vice, and Vice here wanted to kind of do something for a music festival, and the art was used very much to activate the music, to be part of the content. And so not just, I mean, to take social media post of it, obviously, and for people as they enjoy the concept, they would therefore have a similar vision in terms of art, but also for them to kind of, when talking about the festival, they had something that was wow, like, you know, the scale of the sculpture was that, was absolutely magical. And you can see here with the silver as well, it kind of reflected the surroundings. So this is where you kind of see art as visual content, basically. So and use as such, you know. So we can go on the next slide, and then there will be many more details I can add to this. I did say to the girls as well that generally this is a class for you guys, not for me. So by all means, I'm going to rush through the presentation, piling you in with all the details. But what I want is you to ask me questions that are actually helpful to you. And that's very much what's very key. We can pass on what people work with the artists, because that presentation can be shared later. But we therefore have put a few testimonies to why people said they work with us, what they continued that partnership, and what they felt that was the right thing to do from a branding or reputation perspective to kind of partner up with visual artists. So you can read it, and you can definitely access the presentation as well yourself. Okay, so let's go back to, and actually, I just realized, you know what's terrible about it? I have a very heavy female team, and my head of marketing just put this deck. I'm not partially throwing her under the bus, but she just put 3 male artists as example to why our artists are amazing, which I promise to be discussing with men down the line, because I'm incredibly proud of the fact that we are 50-50 from a gender perspective, but we also have a great diversity of artists as well. So I don't want you to think that you're only getting men artists from us, because this is just not true. But I found it funny that this is what my team has put together. So let me just give you therefore 3 examples of what people will be working with this artist. So David Servan-Schreiber. So he's someone that is adored by collectors. When I say adored, like, he's been exhibiting at Sotheby's, and he's also been exhibiting in institutions, and there's not a week that goes by without a collector or someone very known that wants to acquire his works. Like, people obsess with his works. Like, you even have people who buy 4 or 5 in their entire house, and this mainly becomes houses of David. He's one of my first artists, and today we celebrated our 5th birthday, so it's very meaningful because, you know, it's basically my number 2 artist that joined the agency, and one of our biggest successes. So that's really meaningful for me personally as a founder. So he will come with so much reputation, where, you know, people will have walked into certain rooms and they will have seen his works, and they will have walked into houses in the same. And so therefore he is adored by luxury brand. Renard, Pomeletto, Rosewood have all been brands who have specifically wanted to work with him. Actually, that's a picture of Koya as well. We've all been wanting to work with the artist, specifically because, you know, they identify that they share a similar types of clients, and by working with the artist, they can tap with these new types of clients in. But also on the top of this, David is someone that has constantly donated to sustainable charities and constantly been advocating for sustainability. Like, his huge planet is all to do with this. And so they're getting something that is highly luxury, but still ethical. And that can help them also kind of going on to the conversation of sustainability. The slide before was our client UBP, who we just partnered up to open our new space here in Monaco. And, you know, they're one of the most sustainable banks. And for them, that's something that they really want to highlight. Communication wise, the fact that we were a B Corp, the fact that our artists like David cared is something that's really important for them. We move on to SAPE, which is actually, can we go on to the next slide? Because I think SAPE is someone that I would love to explain of his project more than directly himself, because I think his projects are amazing. Again, and yes. Okay, so this is not a mock-up. I highly invite anyone that's on a computer or has a phone nearby to Google SAYPE, SAPE, Eiffel Tower. And you will see this, God knows, so many pictures, you know, of, you know, so many pictures of the projects that he kind of led last year. So what are you looking at? You are looking at 800 meters of biodegradable paint, which is just seen from the Eiffel Tower. And this was what he did last year, helped by 30 companies, all B Corps, the Garden Media Group, and also the Eiffel Tower and the Mayor of Paris. So I wanted to introduce him that way because I think, first of all, this is crazy. Like, I remember, you know, I remember kind of signing him, and he said to me, in 6 months' time, I want to be covering the Champ de Mars, and I want to launch it from the Eiffel Tower. And the Champ de Mars, which is this 800 meters land of grass in Paris, has never been closed historically. And it was magical. Like 6 months' time, 6 months later, you know, we did launch it exactly in the way it happened. And I think, you know, that was generally completely magical. So I think this is a good example of why brands, and I kind of mentioned Lavazza, but there's been many more since, and the 30 companies that were all B Corp want to partner up with them. The idea that you would support a project that is generally the largest public art painting ever made, that is could be launched by the Eiffel Tower, that you could be able to take your clients up the Eiffel Tower, be able to kind of be associated from a communication perspective on something that this was on the cover of the Financial Times or on the cover of any magazines possible, is huge. And that's what that's more something that's on reputation. So I talked about David, that is much more, you know, on the idea of the database and the alignment from a brand to brand. Here, this is something that the brand can say, we took part of something that was historical, and especially like a brand that, like a Lavazza or Vans that has large audiences. This is perfect for them. Like you could see a Nike kind of loving this, or Adidas absolutely loving this, because it is, you know, the artist here becomes an athlete by having to kind of undergo something completely crazy. Like he had to make this in 1 week, and I remember that it was hailing and raining, so it is being associated with something that's like an athlete or a Serena Williams kind of hitting the ball. Is kind of the same kind of achievement. That's a different type of activation, and that's more like a reputation type of activation, but that's SAPE. We can go on the next slide as well. So that's interesting. That was the third one on the pictures. So you had, and shamefully again, I want to remind you that please all head to our website and see that we are a 50-50 company and diverse company, a company that a female founder, that I have to do that. But that's when basically when Leo Kaya, which was the third artist highlighted, partner up with Le Louvre and the airport of Paris. So I'm currently in an airport. I mean, obviously right now, like not many of us can go through it, and you have to have a pretty strong excuse to what you should be going through it. But before this, and as we all hope when it resumes, you know, as we all know, like you have this enormously long corridors, and then you're usually rushing, kind of getting to your flight. The idea for Leo was, how can he use his art to kind of inspire people on his way through. Leo is one of the few artists who has the authorization from the Louvre Museum in Paris to actually shoot their works and kind of do a collaboration with them, which is insane. We released our fifth birthday video today, and there's some shots from the Louvre of dancers and him shooting that are just a dream. And we did this as well from one of his other brand partnership when we shot in it, and it's such a dream. So he basically took the works out quite literally of the museum, and then also incorporated his own art and kind of build the corridor like a huge gallery. And I think that's a very clever partnership, because I think one thing that, kind of going back to Safe just before, that I love doing as part of my job is to use the artists of the art as the central vehicle to align different shareholders. So SAPE has seen the Financial Times, the Guardian Media Group, the Mayor of Paris, 30 companies. They may not align, not all of them may align politically or values-wise, but actually through this project, it was amazing that they could all come together around supporting an artist and being sustainable. Here, this is quite similar, you know, like the airports in Paris and the Louvre may not be the obvious match, but actually the art of the artist can make it the obvious match. And a lot of the times we have partners who tell us, we would love to partner up with them, but we could never really kind of find the way kind of bringing them on board. And I think something like this, or an art project or collaboration, is a way to kind of bring people that you want to work with, but it's not as direct in terms of how you can bring them on board. Next slide, please. Yeah. By the way, we should have a minute of celebration on the fact that I touch wood everywhere, but the Wi-Fi of the airport is still solid. So I feel here I had put a few examples of the brands that I kind of mentioned, and the ones that we're specifically very proud of, which I kind of worked on, and the ones that we've kind of learned a lot from. Let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so this is really interesting, because this is the last, I kind of briefly mentioned it with Vanessa Bruno in South Korea and our artist Jennifer Bistra. This is a brand that is all about selling the product. So you kind of remove the reputation, and although that always plays a part, but this is less the concentration. Here we basically released, and if you go on to the next slide, we released a product as a cleaning product. So I don't know if any of you are familiar with the Californian brand Method. Method basically kind of want your cleaning, which are cleaning products, to be a hell of a lot more exciting and much more colorful and much more artistic. So they are looking to kind of corner the markets of Aesop or kind of diptych, or places where you may not have thought of sparkly, colorful cleaning products, but being in that kind of slowly kind of market as well. So partnering up with artists makes sense for them, because it kind of goes with the fact that they are different and they're bold and they're doing things differently and they incorporate it out that way. If you go on the next slide, you can see, I think, the products a lot more closely. Yeah, so you see here, they ask us, the brief was, and help with Design Lab, who kind of designed the products themselves. The brief was very much like, we want artists that suits our value, that suits our storytelling, and we want to put them on cleaning products. Now, I think the most important thing here, and I've put kind of Anna, who was very much behind it on the marketing side, what was really important is that, to say, is that we sold over £1 million worth of this products, and that's something that was incredibly successful commercially. Something for me that is meaningful is, I don't come from the world of luxury, although I absolutely love partnering with luxury brand, because I'm obsessed with craft and I'm obsessed with being perfectionist on the delivery of the art and the project itself. I also love something that's accessible. I've always kind of looked up to luxury brands who had succeeded to kind of have different level of accessibility and still remain the luxury, because they clearly have the level of craft, but they still understand that everyone has to be a part of your company story, which I've always loved specifically as a founder, and that's independent of the company, because everyone will be different in my team. But therefore, something like this was very meaningful, because I went to supermarkets in the UK when it was first launched, and it was meaningful to see people that, you know, would never have been able to afford art or kind of think they could be a part of that world, to kind of be you know, buy those products and get really excited about them. And we had queues. If you go on Method Addict or on their Instagram, you will see like how people are basically queued up to kind of get that product, you know. So I feel it's, first of all, the commercial success is a tribute to this. I think was really nice, and go back to something that I love, about being inclusive is that you had your art collectors who were not used to buying method, who were suddenly buying method, and then you had people who were buying method or more using Tesco, who therefore be buying suddenly a product like this, and that kind of incorporated them into our world. So that was meaningful on all levels. It was meaningful financially, but also ethically, because I felt it added new demographics to my sector, and my artists were therefore able to inspire people on a much larger scale. And I think the third thing that I think it's it's really nice about it is that the whole reason why they also want to make those cleaning products very beautiful is because they don't want people to kind of throw them away. And here that was I also like the idea that, like, I've seen so many people kind of recycling them into God knows how many things, from lampshades to vases, and yeah, it's just been really nice. It's been a nice story. Let's move on to the next slide. Let's see, how am I doing for time? We have already been speaking for half an hour, so I'm going to slowly, yes, that's all the numbers. Again, I'm more than happy to share my presentation at the end, but at least you have them. And I wanted to kind of really show that, like, I'm a B Corp, so I believe that doing the right thing is also doing business for good. And here, this is an example that you're supporting artists, you're doing the right thing in all ways. It's also ethical, but it's also a commercial success, And I feel that's at the heart of the DNA of MTArt, that we help our partners or our clients to, remain at the highest of their targets, but still go for something that feels right. And as we all know, it's a lot easier to kind of lead a company that way. Let's move on to the next slide. Yeah, so I've explained very much the way we've done it, and again, there's more people that do it. It's not just us at that stage, but I think we will be very unique in a sense that, like, we will manage the talents and very much be a talent agency in the way that we spot the best talents, but then a creative agency in the way we integrate the art, and that still makes us very unique. And I think that's the reason why we have a lot partners and clients that come to us specifically for this. This is really nice because that's the illustration of Seipe Lavazza, which I mentioned, which I think is lovely. And yeah, that's basically, I think, the end of my talk without any Wi-Fi interruption, which is incredibly exciting. Yeah. You can go back to the beginning of the slide because it'll be much easier. So I'm now all ears for your question and things that hopefully can actually help you directly. So please tell me, the things that kind of bothering you, and I'm happy to answer all types of controversial questions as well. So yeah, please, I'm all ears. I'll wait 5 minutes, and if the team wants to ask anything also, please feel free to kind of ask away. Otherwise, I will continue my long monologue, but it is a lot nicer to kind of be talking to people as well. I have someone who is asking me if I'm already done. Yes, for me, like, it was important to do 30 minutes presentation to enable you guys to basically ask questions that were relevant to you, because I always feel that it's such a big topic. Like, some people find it challenging on how do you contract the artist, is who has to direct the collaboration. There's so many questions and usually challenges that arise from this collaboration. As I would love to kind of hear what are the things that you struggle with and what are the things that therefore can help with. Okay, so I have someone on. I feel like a politician I remember watching Le Quotidien, and then there was a politician that was being interviewed, and there was very few questions being asked, and he just stayed like this for 20 minutes. So I'm very glad you're starting asking me questions, because I was like, I'm not used to kind of not be speaking in that sense. My education. So it's really interesting, and I'm pretty sure the person who was asking this is French, because it's something that rarely comes up as much in English questions. So I did 2 years of Hippocagne, which are the Grande École in Paris, no, in Paris, in Poitiers, but in France, therefore. And I feel this is the value of Hippocagne for anyone who is not French and doesn't know that system. You have to basically master 9 subjects at the same time. So it's incredibly hard, and it will kind of go from Monday to Sunday included. It builds a lot of resilience. Actually, quite a few of my team from the French side are coming from this, because their resilience is insane. Like they can take in a level of pressure and a level of stress and work that is incredible. And I think out of this kind of schooling. And you know, and I think the other thing that I think it really gives you is the fact that, like, because you take on different subjects, and for this specifically I took philosophy, literature, the arts, culture, ancient Greek, then you also learn to integrate the subjects. And I think something that I think people really value with MTArt is that if I lead a sustainable art project, or a social diversity project, or if I lead a, I don't know, female empowerment subject, then I will be able to be an expert on both sides. So I will not just care about the art, I will make sure that the message to the wider sector and the other sector is also aligned. And I think that is something that specifically comes from that kind of studies, where you're used to kind of having to master different subjects, but kind of intertwine them, which actually is something that also helps politicians on kind of, you know, being able to kind of mix all the subjects together. The second course that I did was there for history of art as well. Now, as I said, 11 years in terms of work experience, I think this is so much more valuable. The reason I can manage a talent, handle the crisis, still smile when things are going wrong or things are stressful, is because I'm 11 years in, and same with my team. We are all incredibly experienced in what we do, and I am a founder that values more work experience over studies. I think it's a lovely introduction, but I can tell you that the reason we can manage all these partnerships is because we've managed them before, and we can therefore handle all the challenges ahead as well. Oops. Sorry, I almost lost you. What advice do you have for interior designers to reassure clients about decision making and investment art? Therefore, think about it at the beginning of the project, not as an afterthought. It does not make sense. Okay, sorry, I also realized that I read super quickly. So that's actually a great question, and it's something that I have constantly been advocating with interior designers. So the question is, how do you do for art and interior design to kind of work more hand to hand? That's something that we find, because our sector is not yet known, in a sense that many people are not used to working in the arts. We come always at the afterthought, which is a terrible idea, because what you want, and everything I've been kind of saying today, is all about the alignment of the story, the reputation, the message, and the values. So you kind of want to make sure that the artist has been thinking about this alongside everything else happening, and that's why I completely agree on interior design. It needs to be at the start. It needs to be that, and we were so lucky for here in Monaco that they listened to that, because if you kind of head on my Instagram, the furniture and the art are just literally in sync. The building is in sync, and it's just so much nicer because it feels so cohesive. And something that people always say about our projects is how cohesive they feel, and I think that's really kind of important. So I think, what do we say? What kind of tips can I give? So for us, you know, people, I'm very transparent about how we select artists, and how our selection committee is very tough to kind of only recruit the best ones, and why do we pick those people, and what are the criteria to that? I think this really helps our clients, because, you know, there's an element of which they don't think it's a taste of marine, but it's actually something that has been kind of discussed by experts who are part of the selection committee, and it's part of a process. So if something goes wrong, and let's say I'm not friends with the artist anymore, it's still a decision we can back, and it's still something that feels logical and kind of technical in that sense. And I feel this has enabled us to be trusted by people who need logic into what they kind of acquire art-wise and how they go about it. Same in the way that we measure our projects. You know, we always measure the impact of them. We always measure, like, I don't know how many clients they kind of got and the figures that we kind of got from it. So again, it feels less kind of ad hoc. It's less me knowing my cousin is an artist and therefore putting it forward, but it's again kind of going through a process, which I feel it feels reassuring. So, you know, transparency, structure, processes really helps, because as we all know, I do my job because I love it, and I'm sure you do too. And therefore, you know, the fear of people is the fact that we could make purely emotional kind of decisions. And I think having strong processes in that sense enormously help. I'm very sorry because I have to go back to the questions. I missed the beginning of the presentation. Does the majority of artists represented come from France? And Maxim is therefore being late. Well, this is why you should never arrive late in anything. And I say this as having been someone that has arrived late quite a few times. First of all, the conversation will be recorded. I know the girls have made sure that everything that I've said will be recorded. Second of all, we don't. We literally have over 20 countries represented in the artists we represent. Is something I'm super proud of, because I want to represent the diversity of artists, and I want the best talents. I don't want a nationality, I don't want a gender, I don't want a skin color, I just want the best talents, and that's what I want to refer to my clients. So if you head to the website again, you will see that we always highlight where everyone is from, but we do not have just French artists in that sense. Hang on. What advice do you have for launching a new e-commerce launch on a known platform? And how about co-branding with French companies? I think that's two separate questions. There was also a question about where to contact us. I'm personally on Instagram. The company is MTArt Agency. I'm Marine Tanguy Art. Same on LinkedIn, and same for the company. And obviously we have a website, and there's different emails you can contact to kind of reach my team on that basis as well. So the questions on how do we go about launching? I mean, I think I definitely did not. I mean, I have an e-commerce because people do buy art online through us as well. But I don't. You know, we have launched a talent agency, not an e-commerce. So I feel it will be better to ask someone that has kind of launched an e-commerce. I think when it comes to launching a business, I have launched my own business 5 years ago. I would say be prepared for incredibly long hours and dedication, and having a strong vision and a strong story really helps. For us, you know, we've built a powerful community of people. So whether it's we've partnered up with Christie's, that we've partnered up with all the brands I mentioned, and even the mayor of Paris in that sense. And I think we have really kind of crafted a community of people that trusted us, and we built trust from, and we could align also values wise. So I think we've been very strict in what those values were, and how we kind of gain trust people who had similar value. Co-branding with French companies, it's interesting because I launched my company in London. So we have 4 locations, which is London, Paris, Madrid, and Monaco. I therefore started much more in London, like I said at the beginning of the presentation, but I started in London, and then I went to Los Angeles, and this is how I had the idea. So I'm much more of an Anglo-Saxon in regards to the kind of the way I kind of lead business in that sense, and definitely in the way I execute marketing and communication, and I'm very self-driven as well. So in regards to kind of co-branding with French companies, I think like for us, you know, we just started seeing that a lot of the brands and French brands related to what we were doing in terms of the craft, in terms of the values, so the storytelling, and so we started having a demand in France. And that's the reason why we kind of set up an office. It was not because we were French or not French. It was just because it made sense from a pure market demand. I feel the main difference that I see is, and because my business is made of different cultures, and I try to pick every part of the culture that I like and kind of make it into the business. But basically, what I love about the French is how perfectionists they are about the artistic direction. So when we work with Chloe, like Chloe was so insanely perfectionist in how they were shooting things and picking the photographers and kind of highlighting the art and kind of aligning the story. They have a real, like the Italians are very similar, but they have a real craftsmanship and perfectionism that goes with it. And I think the stories and the values and all of that perfectionism will be very important when starting a business conversation. I feel that my relationship with Anglo-Saxons, specifically Americans, are much more goal driven. So they much more want to know, you know, how much we achieve in terms of PR targets or numbers targets or finance targets before we go on to explore the projects. In truth, as we all know, those two things are incredibly important, but obviously in conversations I will kind of go more around that side when kind of partnering up with French companies as well. I'm trying to read all your questions. Okay, so I think exclusivity with the artists has kind of been asked as well. So for us, all we ask for is that we are the main talent agency. Now, we also #1 in the world as a visual arts talent agency. So realistically for artists, it's a very easy decision to make because there's no other top talent agency in the visual art space right now. So, you know, we can ask for that and they benefit from, you know, all our platforms and we also finance them monthly. So I think that's something that they, you know, incredibly enjoy. When it comes to kind of galleries or other partnerships, we just want to make sure that we're in the loop, as in that we kind of in the know that this is happening. But we kind of would let the artist kind of lead that haddock. The talent agency is much more responsible for the sale, the reputation, the sales of the works, the reputation, the collaborations, and the public art activations in that sense. Okay, I have again a question on SAPE, who actually just launched an amazing project with the UN. So actually this was, so SAPE is Swiss, and so kind of taking a step back because this person has asked 4 questions about SAPE. So I feel this is obviously maybe like a sidetrack conversation, and you are more than welcome to ask a lot about each artist. I know that he's a rock star, so I understand. So SAPE recently kind of launched this amazing project with the UN, you know, last week, and was the artist representing Switzerland for that. So SAPE is Swiss and incredibly well supported by Switzerland. So in that sense, in a project like this, you know, he will have the direct support from them. So we can always help extra as the communication, but there's no need when the project is completely in place. And also that's much more of a project that kind of aligns itself for him as within his vision and within the current Beyond Walls project that he was also building. So I hope that answers the question. I think if you want to, we have a press release for this project, and I'm more than happy to kind of send more details specifically on the artist if needs be. Okay, the rest are really nice compliments, which is really nice to know that that you thought that was helpful. You know, if there's anything else that we can answer right now, obviously please ask. Otherwise, you know, if you have any further questions, obviously I'll be boarding my plane, but after my plane, I can look at them on LinkedIn and Instagram, and my team is the same. More than happy to kind of answer them. So yeah, I think it's, for me, I'm just super excited because just only this week we have been working with 3 different brand partnerships, Sofitel, Citizen M, and Primo, which are going to be a huge scale as well. And I'm excited to see that the conversation is starting, and the scale and the value of the project is more and more delivered. So yeah, it's really nice to see that it's definitely a topic for conversations and something that's really interesting as well. So that's going to be my last question. I have a last question on, should a startup consider a conversation or a collaboration with an artist? And the answer is, I think any company should consider a collaboration with an artist. I feel, it's there's so many ways to kind of go by it. As I said, it could be anything from just having it in a space to kind of using the artist as a platform for visibility and reputation. All the ways I've kind of said, we have definitely worked with startup in the past for artists. Obviously, I have been a startup before my company grew, so I am very aware of the budget restrictions that startups have. So having been a founder that was there before, we are very kind and concentrate when it comes to things. But although this is a terrible example because there's no art around me, if you follow us on Instagram, you will see that we have literally put art in cities, on all types of collaborations in any kind of space of interiors. So the answer for me of anyone should be working with them, yes, because I'm convinced of the value that it brings. Now I think it's more a case of defining the brief and making sure that that it's aligned and that it's necessary at the time when the startup is doing it, and the budget is right, and it's the right artist as well. But I think the few startups that we've partnered up with, like Peak, was like a startup that's a community startup to kind of, it's a little game for your memory online. It's been nice to kind of see them take part early days in the artist. For them, they felt that it was something that really added to the employees. They were growing very quickly, and the company culture, when you grow really fast, it's really hard to build. And I felt that this was really, this was really something that helped them, because it also meant that the employees felt part of something through the art and through the artists and through the exhibition that they had chosen. And I think employees' well-being of a startup that is in fast growth is something that could be very relevant in that same way. Well, I think that's basically it. Thank you so much for your kind words as well. Obviously, I'm not going to be reading compliments made, but it's very much appreciated. And thank you so much for everyone for listening. I hope this was very helpful. And as I said, go ahead to MTArt Agency, if you have any questions. Have a lovely rest of the evening and weekend. And it was an absolute pleasure speaking with you. Take care.